Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen West. I am the MTI SBIR STTR consultant for the Maine Technology Institute and the state of Maine. I work with a strong group of consultants in supporting Maine small businesses. And my goal here today, or our goal, I should say, is to introduce you to a federal funding program called the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Program. We have an awful lot of information to cover in the next hour and 20 minutes. We'll try to get to questions. I'll try to take breaks and go through and ask the questions. I think Suzanne will kind of monitor them, but rather than kind of break up the flow, I'll just kind of take breaks and answer the questions. All right, so next slide is our agenda. We want to talk about the SBIR STTR program. And more importantly to all of this is it the right fit for your company? You should never, ever chase the dollars just to get them. Then we're going to talk about the MTI assistance opportunities to help you prepare those competitive proposals that are necessary to win that money. Main success stories, then the next steps, like what happens, what do you do at the end of this presentation to move forward if you're still interested in the program. And then also the SBA FAST Award, Federal and State Technology Partnership Award that MTI received from the Small Business Administration. So just a brief note on this. I have been working with the SBIR STTR program since in Maine since 1997 and cut my teeth, if you will, on the program in the early 90s out in Silicon Valley. It's a great program. God bless you. And if you're not speaking, could you please mute your microphones? That would be great. And so the program has evolved since its inception in 1982. And it used to be very small dollars, very small awards available to the small businesses, but now it's morphed into a $4.4 billion federal program for early stage research and development leading to the commercialization of new products, processes, or services. So it is not a tax on these agencies, it's a mandate. And basically this 3.2% that is set aside for extramural research and development funding comes from each agency's budget. Extramural means outside of the agency. R&D is research and development. The federal government does not make anything, it buys everything. And so extramural just means extramural outside the agency R&D. I'll explain the difference between the SBIR program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program in a couple of slides, but just know that it is a smaller program. We call it a sister program to the SBIR program. And it's, as you can see, it's quite small. It's less than 0.5% set aside for R&D work and awards. Again, overseen by the Small Business Administration. I have it in my slides later, but if you're interested in looking at it, the site for the SBIR program is sbir.gov, www.sbir.gov. And the purpose is to stimulate technological innovation and ensure that small businesses have a seat at the R&D table. As you know, there is a lot of competition for federal dollars, both from universities, research institutions, large businesses. Many different groups are always interested in SBA and federal funding. So this program is a set aside for small businesses, and it is the largest source of early stage high risk technology financing in the United States. And in the SBA's rebranding, as you can see in the logo in the upper left hand corner, it's America's Seed Fund. So I was talking about the differences earlier. I'd mentioned just briefly the differences between the SBIR and the STTR program. And basically, they both have an R&D focus, whether it's SBIR or STTR. However, the STTR is looking to promote technology transfer between the private and public sector. And so while both programs want you to, if appropriate, to partner with a nonprofit research institution, under the SBIR program, you may partner with a research institution, and under an STTR, you must partner with a nonprofit research institution. That is the biggest difference between the two programs. The principal investigator, that's the person leading the project from the small business, and that principal investigator at time of award must be an employee of the small business. So that means when you submit a proposal, you could still be working at another company, but at time of award, you have to have 51% employment by the small business. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to spend 51% of your time on the project. It's just that that 51% primary employment precludes full-time employment elsewhere. So you might be able to go into a part-time status with your current company or reduce the hours to less than 20. Now, in the STTR program, the principal investigator could be employed by either the small business or the research institution. As I noted in red in the upper left-hand corner, the small business is always the applicant and the awardee. So in the case of an STTR, you'd basically have two PIs. You will have the small business principal investigator, or what's more commonly known as the contact principal investigator for the small business, and then the actual, if you will, technical principal investigator could be employed by the research institution. So another major difference between the two programs is the work requirement. And this is all based on the budget that you propose and that the agency accepts. And in a phase one, a small business may subcontract out to 33% in a phase one and up to 50% in a phase two. And now I'll explain in a few minutes what the difference is between a phase one and phase two. Just know that that is an opportunity for you to use a research institution, consultants, large business, or other small businesses as part of your project. In the STTR, the small business must do 40% of the work. The research institution partner must do 30% of the work, and the other 30% can be divvied up between the two or awarded to other consultants, research institutions, or large businesses. So, excuse me, the program with STTR is fairly flexible. And these numbers, they're dated about the program size, but I don't have the latest numbers, so I decided to leave it in. As you can see, there's as I noted earlier, $4.4 billion. So the SBIR program is much larger than the STTR. Now, one of the things you're going to hear me talk about throughout this presentation is every agency is a little bit different. Every agency has its nuances, and this is one of them under the major venture capital ownership. Some of the agencies do permit ownership by VCs, most notably the National Institutes of Health. And the reason they adopted that part of the policy directive overseen by the SBA is because of the cost to bring new products, medical devices, drugs to market. But not all agencies allow VC ownership. So this is where I'm going to say it depends on the agency, and you would have to read the solicitation or the application instructions. There are 11 federal agencies that participate in the SBIR program, but of those 11, only 5 participate in the STTR program. And that is because it is agency-based budget determinations as to whether or not they must provide an STTR program. And I can talk about this in a few minutes, but most notable here with the STTR program is that the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, did have to add the STTR program in the past year. So that's new to them and new to all of us.
And Karen, there was a question in the chat about whether you can provide the slides. I know you're diving into a lot of detail in the very beginning here.
That's
and people,
right.
Want to make sure that they'll have this information so they don't have to jot it all down.
Oh, absolutely. Good question, and thank you. The audio is being recorded on my cell phone, and the slides will either be available through Zoom, or what I'll do is put up the audio and Adobe slides on MTI's website. If you registered to attend this webinar, please be assured that you'll have a copy of the slides and hopefully the audio recording as well. So I tend to keep the slides somewhat cryptic so I don't end up reading the slides. And so with the audio, you're getting the color behind the statement, if you will. So I had mentioned earlier about the SBIR STTR program and why it was established. But what's important here to know that there are 5 primary elements of the SBIR STTR program and what it serves, what its end goal is for the small businesses. So it's research and development, and you're going to hear me say this again: early stage, high risk research and development leading to the commercialization of new products, processes, and services. Very early stage. In most cases, it's a small business's first receipt of any funding for their technology or idea. It's innovation. Does it move the science forward? The federal government knows that if they give you X number of dollars, you're going to benefit, but they want to know what's in it for them. And the biggest part is the societal benefits along with the technological innovation, moving that science forward. Commercialization. It's very hard to bring new products, processes, or services to market, but their whole goal is to de-risk the technology so that your technology and your company becomes more attractive to others. And participation. So there is there is always a focus on getting more women and minority-owned businesses into the program, and that focus is gaining steam. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the FAST Award, but know that while women and minorities and those in underserved communities are the focus of outreach efforts, outreach and education efforts, you really don't gain an extra edge, if you will, in the review process. But it doesn't hurt. And if there was ever a tie between, say, a white male owned company and a female owned company, it maybe the award would go to the woman owned company. And technology transfer. Technology transfer has always been important, and that's basically defined as getting the technology out of a research institution and into the marketplace. There's a lot of really good technology being developed in the research institutions, and if they can partner with a small business to participate in the SBIR STTR program, then they can hopefully get the technology out of the lab and into the marketplace. All right, good. Next slide. Again, talking about it, funding early stage. Early stage. Now, MTI, Maine Technology Institute, provides funding for all stages of a small business's entrepreneurial pathway, if you will, from idea to commercialization. But in many cases, this SBIR STTR program is even earlier than what MTI will fund. And it's basically de-risking the technology. It's being reviewed by peers in the industry and also by commercialization experts. So when it goes through this process, it is actually being, and you perform both in a phase 1 and phase 2, you are de-risking the technology, making it more attractive for outside capital. Now, the biggest reasons follow with the benefit of the SBIR's TTR program is it is not alone. There is no repayment of either phase 1 or phase 2 funding, nor is there a match requirement, nor in many cases is there a limit as to the number of SBIR's TTR awards that you can receive. So there's minimal risk from having to pay something back if your phase 1 feasibility efforts don't work out, but there is no repayment or a cost match. So keep that in mind. It's also non-dilutive capital. The federal government, this program, the SBIR's TTR program, is the only federal program that does not take two things, intellectual property and also require equity in your company. So again, it's great money. And then depending on the agency you're dealing with or getting your awards from, mostly this is the Department of Defense, there can be follow-on phase 3 awards to help continue developing the technology for program insertion. Okay. So I've been talking about these elusive 11 federal agencies, and here's a slide with all of the medallions of the different agencies. The two biggest agencies that participate in the SBIR and STTR program is the Department of Defense, and they're roughly $1.8 billion. And the National Institutes of Health in the center, that is under the Health and Human Services Agency, it's 1.15. And again, these numbers are now higher. We then have the Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, NASA, and new this year is the USDA, Department of Agriculture. The smaller agencies of DHS, the Homeland Security, Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, and the EPA only have the SBIR program. Now, Department of Commerce, the two departments that participate under the SBIR program are NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST. Now, just to let you know, if you're interested in NOAA, because they have a strong ocean focus and also aquaculture focus, that the NOAA solicitation is currently out, and letters of intent are required. And I should be able to talk about that later. If I don't, please remind me if you'd like to hear more about that. Again, agency nuances. All of these bullets talk about what's different between the two. And this is, well, actually in between the 11 agencies. And this is why MTI created its Technical Assistance Program. And we call it TAP, because these agency nuances and the program, while it's directed at small businesses, is not necessarily, in my opinion, small business friendly. It can be complex. It's very competitive. You have to read the instructions and follow them and understand all of the, if you will, the hoops that you have to jump through. But the biggest differences are the types of awards, grants and contracts. And I think I have a slide on that next. So just set that aside. But grants and contracts are the two award vehicles that are used. The dollar amounts and number of awards for a phase 1 and phase 2 also differ. For instance, within the National Institutes of Health, a phase 1 could, and they can exceed the minimum or the maximum amount of funding for a phase 1 of $275,000 phase 1, and what is it? I think $1 million for phase 2. The National Institutes of Health routinely does 300 and some odd thousand, around $350,000, and upwards of $2 million for a phase 2. The smaller agencies such as USDA and NOAA may have $100,000 to $165,000 phase 1, and phase 2s of $500,000 to $700,000. The length of the application, most of the agencies do require a 15-page project narrative, at least for a phase one. However, the National Institutes of Health says, no, we want a one-pager of your objectives, which they call aims. And instead of 15 pages for the, excuse me, for the project narrative, they want 6 pages. So the length of the application is different by agency. And then 2 is how it gets submitted. That can make a big difference too. Are you submitting through grants.gov, through an agency portal? The requirements here for registration, and I'll be touching on this later, are vast, and it takes a while. So if at any point you think you're interested in learning more about this program and possibly wanting to participate, you'll want to get through the registration process soon. The level of scientific discussion also differs based on the agencies. For instance, if you read the solicitation for the National Science Foundation, they want paradigm shifting, high risk research and development into new technology that actually moves the science forward, and it's based on deep technology. The USDA says, well, we support small businesses, we support farmers, small and mid-sized farms, we support rural and community development. And so the level of scientific discussion is not necessarily as high in USDA as it is in NSF or Department of Energy. The proposal review process also changed, is different by agency, whether it is an internal review or an external review. And I'll get into that in a minute. Lots of nuances. So with the granting agencies, which I've listed here, they have very broad topic areas. And basically when we say broad topic areas, we're saying these ideas are investigator initiated. In other words, they have a broad area of biotechnology. And basically then it's up to the small business to develop a technology under the biotech topic. You can also talk with the program directors at any time, and they have an external review, peer review process consisting of technical and commercialization experts. So with the National Science Foundation as a granting agency, you also have to submit a project pitch. And then once you submit that project pitch, they review it and possibly invite you to submit a full proposal. So again, that's another nuance. Every agency is different, but underlying it all is the basic premise as outlined in the SBA's policy directive. The contracting agencies, DOD, NASA, Department of Homeland Security, EPA, DOT, et cetera, have very specific topics of interest and are focused in meeting a program need. And with many of these agencies, contracting agencies, you may only see a topic once. This is especially true with the Department of Defense. And why is that? Because with DOD, if they've gone through and selected you as a small business to go through the phase 1, phase 2 process, they're looking to you to solve their problems. So they're going to take you through phase 3 and program insertion. So they're actually going to end up buying your product. So what happens is, because of these very specific topics, and they will tell you what they want to see in a phase 1 and in a phase 2, you're going to see a shorter period of time to prepare a proposal, very limited communication capabilities, and most of the time the review is done internally by program officers and contracted organizations. So what you're going to find is that many of the names that you are most familiar with today actually got their start in the SBIR STTR program. And so one of the biggest ones, I don't believe it's showing on here. Let me just check. I don't think so. iRobot, it is showing on here. That started out as an IED, explosive device detonation or detector device. And now that's what your iRobot that you use to vacuum your house is based on. 23andMe is genetic detection. So that also, I'm not sure what that program started out as, that technology started out as, but there are several big names, if you will, that got its start within the SBIR program. And, you know, we'd love to see one of our main companies be the next big name and well known throughout the US and globally. All right. So since the beginning, I've been talking about these elusive phases. A phase one, and that's the entry gate. Okay, I'm sorry, this is the entry point. It is a gated program in most cases. So a company submits a phase one proposal, and the whole purpose of phase one is to prove feasibility. Will my idea work? And to do that, you'll propose 2 or 3 objectives and then perform work within 6 months to a year to prove your feasibility, to prove that your technology will work as you intend. And you can get funding up to $276,000. So if you're successful in proving feasibility in phase one, you then write another proposal, again, more complex, a little more in depth in terms of requirements, and also a full commercialization plan. You'll write this phase two proposal for prototype development. You'll have 2 years to do the work, and you can receive funding up to $1.9 million, again, depending on the agency. So what this is doing is you're de-risking the technology, you're proving the hypothesis, and once you do that, and it can be in the term of a benchtop model, it can be a rubric, it can be anything to show that your hypothesis and that your objectives show that the technology works the way it's supposed to. In phase two, with this prototype development, you're actually beginning to create a product for customers and users to buy. And there's nothing wrong within the second year of a phase two that you start receiving some limited revenue from sales of prototypes to your customers. And then phase three is commercialization. There is no SBIR or STTR funding. There can be program money. There can also be some more post-phase two funding to help advance the prototype development. But at this point, the company should be well positioned to go for angel funding, or it's still probably too early for VC, but maybe continued friends and family or other funding opportunities. What happens here is, if you're in the entrepreneurial world, you'll see the chart that shows the valley of death, which is the leap between phase two and actually, you know, commercialization, starting to recognize that revenue. MTI, depending on where you're at with the funding from them, and Shane Beckim will be talking about that later. You know, it could be another opportunity, and we have the Maine Venture Fund. So there are opportunities within the state of Maine, but you've got to plan ahead. When I first started with this program back in the early 90s, and even into 97, when I started focusing on it in Maine, companies would say to me, I can't talk to a customer yet. I don't have a product in hand. So once I get a product developed, then I can go out and everyone will be, you know, packed to my door. We don't do that anymore. And it's if you still believe that, you're going to have to do a paradigm shift, if you will, in your thought process, because we want you to be talking to customers and end users about what they need, what their pain points are, even before you submit a phase one. So you have to be customer focused from the beginning. Now, having said all of that, please note that this is federal money, and we call it patient capital. And this is just a timeline that it can take, that your technology could take from identification of the opportunity all the way to commercialization. So in many cases, this program may not be for your existing product, unless it's the only product that you have and you can't get outside funding. But if you're an existing business, then you can use this to keep your R&D pipeline full. So it is a slow process, but it's one that's been proven to work over the years. Okay, let's take a minute and see if anyone has any questions that I can answer for you. You can either unmute yourself, put them in the chat, whatever you would like. All right. Nope.
Oh, I got one. Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Oh,
Yeah,
there
I
we
guess
go.
so. With the customer-centric focus, especially with disruptive technologies, how do you even go about getting that input when there's no market, or when the market is very niche or uncertain? I guess, like, do you treat more theoretical academic, perhaps users as customers? Would you try to identify target areas? I guess, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And actually, that's a really, really great question. So let me ask you this, just on the aside, and I'll probably bring in Suzanne Hamlin as well. But have you ever heard of an elevator pitch?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So an elevator pitch is probably where you want to start, right? Because you've even if it's very nichey, or you don't want to disclose the secret sauce, you still have to be able to tell and communicate to everyone what's important about your technology and how it works to a certain level, and then what its use is going to be. Now, I'll tell you, just on a general note, there are several examples out on the internet too about non-disclosure agreements. Excuse me. And non-disclosure agreements will protect protect them and protect you as you go through what we call the customer discovery process. Suzanne, would you like to weigh in too on this question?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think this is a really important question, Tom, and it tends to be counterintuitive for a lot of people. But what we've learned over the years is that the number one reason that a product fails is because you don't understand the customer needs and wants well enough. So what we suggest, if you have a broad brush technology that could be used in a bunch of different customer applications, different kinds of products, then yes, choosing a target application that you think for a bunch of reasons might be the early adopters is a good place to start. But you might actually, if it's a really broad technology, you might choose several areas that your intuition and what you know about those areas says could be early adopters, and then go out and test it. When you go talk to customers, you don't have to actually talk about your technology, because what you're trying to do, instead of it being a sales pitch about how great your idea is you want to actually go out and hear what they are trying to accomplish, what they need to be doing to be successful in their business or in their personal life, and then understand how your technology might really radically change what they're able to do or how they're able to do it in meaningful ways. And that's the kind of innovation that we're looking for. So you're right. Sometimes it's not about just, well, somebody drinks Pepsi and I want to introduce them to Coke. It's not an incremental difference. It's a radical difference. Like, instead of drinking, we want to have them use IV bags all day long. I mean, that's a silly example, but so then you really need to go and try to find out, like, what is it that you need to do? You need to stay hydrated through the day, right? You don't need to drink a Coke. You don't need to do this other thing, but you need to stay hydrated. So it's an art as much as a science, but there are some ways of doing that. And this has been proven to really sort of radically increase the level of success that companies are having. This concept of customer discovery is part of the lean startup methodology that has become quite popular. And I'm going to find a link for a piece that was developed called Talking to Humans. That's a very good resource, and I'm going to put that in the chat.
That's great. Good question. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. It is all about commercialization, and that's what's important for you to remember. The funding is what's going to move your technology forward, but you've got to keep your eye on getting the commercialization active, if you will, sooner rather than later. It's really kind of surprising in many cases when some of the companies applicants, if you will, approach larger businesses, that the interest is really there, and it can be very surprising. And they can be a great partner in phase 2 if you want to start testing your prototype. All right, get some real world testing at a customer site and get all of that effort paid for by the SBIR program. So don't discount talking to the customer sooner rather than later. All right, so I probably have gone on more than I needed to about the SBIR STTR program. I love it. It's phenomenal, but it has to be right for you. And as I said, first off, please do not chase the money. Make sure it is the appropriate path for you to take for your technology. So there are some eligibility requirements that are set by the SBA's policy directive, and they're pretty much unbroachable or unbreakable. So the applicant must be a for-profit, U.S. owned and operated by an American and have less than 500 employees. Now, it also can be green card owned companies, but it must be for-profit. The work must be done in the U.S. This is U.S. taxpayer dollars at work, and they want the work done in the U.S. So if you're having your software being developed in India or some other place overseas, you're going to have to find a U.S. source. Your consultants and your subcontractors must also be in the U.S. If not, there is one avenue, if you will, you can pursue, and that is request an exemption, but you have to show that that person or that company is the only one in the world that can do the work, and that the technology or that expertise does not exist in the U.S. The focus is on performing research and development, specifically in a phase 1. They do not want you purchasing a lot of equipment or commercializing an already developed technology. So in a phase, when we talk about purchasing equipment, we're talking about $5,000 or more. It's the company or the agency expects the company to have the infrastructure or be able to rent it. Given the relative small size of phase 1, you don't want to be spending all of your time and effort or all of your money, if you will, on buying equipment. You've got to actually perform and do the work. So again, you've heard me talk about the SBA policy directive. You can find that at sbir.gov. It talks about the VC ownership. It also talks about affiliation and control. And so if you're a small business owned by a large business and it has more than X number of employees, then you may not be eligible to participate in the program. So there are the nuances within the directive for ownership. But basically, if you're in Maine, you're a for-profit organized company, you as the owner, are a U.S. citizen, or have green card access, chances are you're going to qualify for this program. But beyond that, we need you to consider, is it right for your business? Okay. And before you actually dive into the process, you really need to start asking yourself these questions. Do you have the technical competence? Okay. Can you oversee a project's development? One of the first companies I worked with, the company's president was an MBA, and that person had developed technology to discover contaminants in water. And he kept going after SBIRs, and he was not successful. Why? Because he didn't have the technical competence. So what you're going to have to do is look to a team. When you're a startup, and by the way, most of the awards go to companies of 1 to 9 employees. so when you're starting up, you have to look at how can you surround yourself with the best quality team available. Okay. You have to look to that nonprofit research institution, other small businesses, to consultants, everyone to assemble this credible team. Those are the sort of things that you should have in place. In a phase one, they'll let you be a company of one. They prefer two. But once you get to a phase two, they're expecting to see a pretty robust team. Also, what will this innovative technology achieve? Is it going to meet your company goals? Again, do not chase the money. Does it have societal merit? How are you improving the lives of the people in the US and the world? And does it meet the agency mission? Those are all important questions. And the last one is something that Suzanne, as we talk through our technical assistance plan and commercialization support, is does it provide a strong ROI? If a, excuse me, if a small business receives upwards of $2 million for phase one, phase two funding, and you show in your phase two performa that in 10 years, your market is only, less than 1% of the global market and has a size of maybe, $100 million or even 50 million. We've seen them pretty low. Is that a strong enough ROI to warrant an agency to invest in your technology? Probably not. So you need to really understand your market, and you need to understand how much that you could actually capture as you move forward. They like to see a strong return on their investment. And then finally, what's your long-term?
Can I just clarify, when you say addressable market of 50 to $100 million and you're only going to get 1% of it, that means that your revenues are only going to be 500,000 or $1 million a year potentially.
Right.
So, not that if you have a $50 million business, that's not enough for the SBIR, because it is.
Yeah. Yes.
Just to
yes,
be clear.
You're absolutely right. Right.
Just to be clear.
No, I'm glad you did that, Suzanne, because when I was presenting, I was not thinking of it from that point of view, but of course. Good. All right. And so the long-term plan. All right. Am I ready to commit 3 to 4 years to commercializing this innovation? Again, it's a slow process. Do you really want to run the business? What do you want? Do you want a lifestyle business? Do you want to be a gazelle? And do you have a roadmap in place? If you're going to be working on this program, you need to have a technology roadmap and a business roadmap. And then you need to be looking at where these two get combined and where you're going to get the funding, because that's the only way you're going to succeed post phase two. All right, SBIR funding is great for small businesses. And as I've been talking throughout this whole presentation, it's also very complex and competitive. Unfortunately, the success rate for a phase one is 12 to 17%. The awards are getting bigger and the budget is not growing quite as much, so the number of awards are decreasing. The phase two, however, because this is a gated program, in most cases, remember gated being you have to get a phase one to get a phase two. When you prepare and your phase two application gets reviewed, it is only being reviewed by other phase one awardees. So your success rate goes up to 40 or to 50%, sometimes even higher. So this is where the real money's at. Remember, that's anywhere between $500 to $1 million. You have to understand the nuances, and this is where MTI's TAP team can help, where I can help guide you through this process. Every agency has its own focus, its own goal, its missions, expectations, processes, all of that stuff. So you have to be willing to be adaptable and willing to comply with those agency requirements. You have to find a technology fit to an agency. Unsolicited proposals are not welcome. And so what we try to do during the SBIR discovery process is for me to understand your technology and then look to the 11 federal agencies to see where it might fit. And in many cases, what we'll find, and I've got a couple of slides coming up, is that we could fit your technology into more than one agency. So don't assume just because you're doing a medical device that the only agency that is applicable to you is the National Institutes of Health. If it improves the lives of people in rural areas, it could be a USDA technology of interest. It could also go into the Army if you can get them to develop a topic or find a topic with your device technology in it, because they have the largest warfighter, employee base, if you will, out of all of the federal agencies. But also keep in mind, these proposals take a commitment. They take an awful lot of time and effort to develop. It's not something you, excuse me, that you can develop overnight. You can figure it can take 2 to 3 months. You've got to look at not just the technology, but the business size, a business side of the technology, the market, the competition. So patient capital is the only way to say it. And again, you've heard me say this before, the commercialization process can take years. So when we talk about technology, and I said never judge the agency by its name, all of these agencies fund energy, space, autonomy, AI, artificial intelligence, data analytics, sensors, health, agriculture and aquaculture. It's across all areas, materials, cybersecurity. Don't just think that you can silo your technology. And sometimes what we'll find is when we think we have a slam dunk with one agency, say National Science Foundation, we find out, oh, they're not really interested in it, but they turn around, retool their proposal and submit to USDA or NOAA, and there's a good interest in it and it gets funded. So it's never a dull moment within these programs. And I just was talking about an important point. With a success rate of 12 to 17% in a phase 1, excuse me, you obviously a lot of proposals are being declined. And in some cases, that's very good, because what you're going to do as part of what you're going to get from the review process is what we call a debrief. And that debrief is going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of your proposal. That gives you the opportunity to retool, rewrite your proposal, and resubmit. And what we're finding is when companies resubmit the proposal, it has a higher likelihood of being funded. So it just slows the process down, but it is a learning process. Here are an example of the broad topics by the National Science Foundation. As you can see, they've got, I think, 25 different broad topic areas. And so it can be kind of interesting to work with NSF, but what happens is you pick a technology area for your technology. You submit a project pitch of which our TAP team can help you with, and they'll review it and hopefully invite you to submit a full technology. But let's say you came up with a mobility device and you wanted to submit it under medical devices. If they feel it's not a good fit for their portfolio, that mobility program director might put it into medical devices instead. They tend to work very closely together across all of the portfolios and program directors to ensure that your proposals get into the right area. And if you can't find one out of all of these topic areas, there's one in the upper right called Other. So they really are very broad. They're wanting to see what you as investigators can develop. But NSF, again, as I was talking, expects high risk, paradigm shifting technology. This is as opposed to, if you will, the Department of Agriculture. And I'd like to call out here the two topics I mentioned earlier: rural and community development and small and mid-sized farms. With rural and community development, what they are saying here is it does not necessarily have to be new technology, but it can be technology already existing and then applied in a novel way to support those people that live in rural areas and to give them the same opportunities as those in more urban areas. Telemedicine is probably one of the biggest and best examples of applying existing technology to rural and community development. Of note within this rural and community development topic area is they expect to have you to have an objective in your plan that talks about the societal impact. So, you know, you have to have that focus and that expertise within your team and available as part of your phase one. Small and mid-sized farms, they will support market strategy in business model development as part of their phase one, phase two awards. And what's great about all of these agencies is you can go, and I'll talk about this later again with SBIR.gov, but you can do previous award searches based on keywords. And every single one of these agencies show their awards, except for DoD, on their website. So you can also do keyword search on a specific agency's awards from the SBIR STTR program. So you've got to do your due diligence. So we've talked about a little bit of the review process. I haven't gone into the depth and detail of what's in a project narrative. I tend to do agency-focused webinars, and agencies do webinars as well, and that's where we would focus on the different elements of a proposal. But a proposal would have a project narrative, a project summary, bio sketches, budget justification, facilities, subaward budgets, subaward budget justifications. Let's see. I think I said project summaries. In a phase one, depending on the agency, they're going to ask you for some commercialization information. NSF has a really strong focus on commercialization. So in phase one, approximately 50% of your 15-page proposal has to be focused on commercialization and explaining your technology in layperson's terms. And most of the agencies in phase two require anything between a 10 and 15-page commercialization plan. So depending on the agency, we had talked about internal and external reviews. You have to always, well, you don't have to, but you should. You should be writing your proposal based on the review criteria. And these are actually the 5 bullets. And if you can see, the theme that I've been talking about throughout this entire hour has been the scientific and technical merits, societal benefits, technical risk, commercial potential, and firm qualifications. So that's what you write to. If you don't understand what the review criteria are when you're developing your proposal is going to be lacking, because that's what it's evaluated on. Suzanne Hamlin and I have both been reviewers for the National Science Foundation and the USDA. We, within NSF, because they do an external review process, the program director will convene a panel, and that normally consists of at least 3 technical reviewers with expertise in that general field, and 3 commercialization experts, such as Suzanne, myself, or others in the industry. And so what we've found in many cases, is that a lot of times the proposal will have technical merit, but the societal or the business merit just isn't there. And in many cases, in the opposite world, it can also happen in that the company's written a great commercialization plan, you know, it's compelling, the market's huge, and then the technical reviewer says it's not going to work. It's not based on sound existing scientific methodology. There's no way it can work. It's not being proposed in the right way. So, you know, it's nuanced, but it's important. And if you can, we always recommend that you try to get others to read your proposal to see if it makes sense. It's kind of the forest and the trees sort of thing. All right, so I'm going to take a minute and look at the questions and see what we have. If you have any more questions, please put them in chat or just, go ahead and talk about it.
So Ann Lancaster asked about a case study or an example from phase 1 to commercialization.
So we're going to be talking about success stories in a little bit. And those are some really good examples. It's hard to talk about case studies because technology is obviously proprietary to the company. So we have to get approval before we talk about company technology. But the success stories are basically written by the company. So we'll look at it from that standpoint, but when you can get me started on success stories and case studies of what works, what doesn't work, it's a developmental process. So let's see, Tom Snyder asked, go ahead, Suzanne.
Just for the sake of illustration, let me just give a very quick view of Eldertide Farm and Maine Medicinals. Edie Johnston moved to Maine. She bought a farm in Dresden. She found these amazing plants called elderberries on it, and she got intrigued. What she learned was that elderberries are one of 5 superfruits. They have incredibly high antioxidants that really do actually boost your immune system. And she proposed to the USDA that she would do a scientific experiment to see if she could keep those antioxidant levels high in a nutraceutical syrup that people could take to help, with that antioxidant potential would boost their immune system. So in phase 1, she did some benchtop experiments to determine which cultivars might work well and taste good, but also retain their antioxidants when you extracted the juice. And then in phase 2, she developed it, and in subsequent work, developed it into a very successful product that Maine Medicinal sells now called Anthoimmune.
Right. And she is a Tibbetts awardee, which if you're not in the industry probably doesn't mean anything, but it exemplifies excellence in SBIR work. And she has actually gone on to receive 6 awards. Her last 2 have been from the Department of Defense. So, you start out with USDA and then all of a sudden you've got DoD technology. So it's pretty interesting. So does the nonprofit partner have to be in the US? Yes. If they're going to be, well, let me back that one up.
And Karen, I think that question came in before you answered the question during your presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, Tom, if you have anything more on that, just let me know. Okay. So Krista asked, how does one choose which agency to apply to? That's where I come in, and I know.
That also you answered.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm going to go on with that one. That's a plug for the technical assistance program, and for me to work with the companies one-on-one to help them identify the agencies. And there, as I said earlier, it could be more than one or the other. So don't go it alone is my thesis on that. So Tom also asked the question about the $5,000 limit only applying to capital expenses. Yes, it is capital expenses. So you can spend $5,000 on prototype materials and such. Okay, let's see what else we have down here.
Ann Kennedy has a question.
Yeah, there's a couple of them. All right. Let's see. So yes, Nan, when you talk about agriculture, gestation time, farming time, with USDA, you submit your proposal in October. You hear in February or March that you're going to be selected for an award, and you start work in, I think it's June in a phase 1. You can always ask for program extensions based on that, and they normally have no problems with that. It just means your project might stay fallow for a while you're waiting for the correct time frame. But yes, especially USDA, they totally understand that cycle. Sean asked, in the phase one proposal, would you ask for a certain amount of funding for R&D support, or do you send the proposal without requesting a grant amount? And then the agency will decide if and when, and if and how much to award. So if an agency's funding amount, excuse me, in phase one is $175,000, you are going to ask for $175,000 or $275,000. You're going to go in for the maximum amount. And you do develop a budget justification justifying why you need that amount of money. This is a technical competition. It is not a cost competition. So you don't get any benefits or points if you propose a less dollar amount. What's important is that you propose the dollars necessary to do the work. So it's all part of your proposal and development of the proposal and the budget. The biggest thing we can tell you about that is to ensure that your budget and your scope of work is congruent. And by congruent, I mean that it's balanced, that you're not asking for too much money and not enough work, or the other way around is proposing a 1-year effort for 6 months and $275,000. So it's all about a balance, and that's where the TAP team can help. So just briefly, because we're almost running out of time here and we still have a fair amount of information to cover, but there is something called MTI's TAP team, Technical Assistance Program. And we've kind of talked about it throughout the whole day or throughout the past hour, but these are the services the TAP team provides at no cost to the small business. So in this case, MTI provides the funding for this cadre of consultants to work with small business applicants. It includes myself as the generalist with the knowledge across all programs. I'm with you from identification of technology fit to proposal submission. And so we have a government accountant, we have 2 right now, and we have 2 market researchers. The market research is used to inform the commercialization strategy. So we don't do the writing, but we do heavy editing. That'd be a good way to say it. So here is the process when working with TAP. If you're interested in working with us or even finding out more about the program and how your technology might fit, you'll need to go to MTI's website at maintechnology.org. and fill out an intake form under the Get Started tab. Then once you're in that intake form completion box, there's a drop down that says, I'm submitting an SBIR, I want TAP support. That gets you into MTI's database and allows me to start working with you to do discovery. And in the discovery, we'll have a series of phone calls where we'll talk about technology agencies. I'll give you more information about the SBIR STTR program. You'll go away, do research, or maybe develop your project pitch or letter of intent. And then we'll move on to finding that fit. And when an application is released from one of the agencies, a solicitation, then we'll actually get started to write a proposal. Now with the National Science Foundation, they're one of the larger agencies, so they issue topics that are good for the year. And then they have windows for rolling submission. The registration process I'll talk about in a minute, but this is the process of how it works. Okay. Also, MTI provides funding to support phase 1, phase 2 applicants. And this is separate from the TAP team. And it's up to $5,000 to provide support for grant writers, market reports, technical expertise that's needed. So if you have a consultant that you want to work with in phase 1 and that person's going to help develop your scope of work, then you can apply to MTI to get funding for that. And then in phase 2, we again have, MTI has funding to improve your business model development, to make commercialization more likely, and to make your application more competitive. All right, so real quick, just SBIR, some numbers from main awardees. You're going to see 137 small businesses have won 870 awards. It's over $136 million. The awards have been spread throughout the state. And what we have found that with the guidance of the TAP team, companies have a tendency to have a higher success rate than trying alone. And in a couple of cases, we've had companies submit not knowing about the TAP team, get declined, and then even the program director will say, you have this resource in Maine, why don't you use it? And so they'll go back, they'll come to us, retool, resubmit the proposal, and normally get an award. Okay, so did I hit the wrong button? I most certainly did, I think. So these are the success. Are you guys still there? Can you see my slides? These success stories,
No, we can't see your slides anymore.
Dear.
Karen.
Shoot. I was afraid of that. I hit the wrong button. Let me get back into this. Sure. Yeah, go right ahead, Susan.
No, it's Nan.
Hi, Nan. Yeah.
Hi, Nan. How are you? I'm sorry
Good.
about the Washington connectivity.
No, I'm actually in Maine. It's just my computer.
No, my question was about how soon can you apply for TAP funds? Presumably it sounded like it is before the NOFA.
Yes, depending on the agency, yes. If we know that the topic areas aren't changing, and they normally don't from year to year with USDA, we could start working in January, presuming that the topics will be good and still be in the solicitation when it's released in June for an October submission. And that actually works quite well because a lot of times, in the ag world and the farming world, winter is your slow time. So you could get started now. Yep.
Right. Thank you very much.
And just to be clear, for those who haven't worked with TAP before, the TAP team does not involve any funding directly. It's paid by MTI, so you don't actually see any funding from the TAP services, but there are MTI funds available to Maine-based companies to augment the TAP services.
Right. Those were the previous slides that were discussed. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we're able to work with you throughout the process. The only time that wouldn't work would be with DOD because we don't know what the topics are going to be. So briefly, we had talked about UNAR and the phase 1 awards that they've received, $1 million phase 2, and also a $300,000 phase 1. And Hari is looking to submit or resubmit a phase 2 to the NIH. So he's been working hard on that. It's really great technology that allows graphical images to be displayed on smart devices and do it in real time. So where blind and visually impaired individuals have the same opportunity in STEM as those who are not visually impaired. Introspective Solutions has worked with the Department of Energy over the years. Another good success story back in the day. And Kay's been very good at promoting the SBIR STTR program. Rockstep Solutions is another Tibbetts awardee. Chuck Donnelly, the CEO, started with Jack's Labs and has now built a business that he is now almost, what do I want to say? I can't think of the term, but he is not the president in the company anymore. They've actually hired someone with the business expertise to keep Klein moving forward. But this one has been interesting. He's had some fits and starts, but he's always been scaling and growing. So it's a great company. It's a great story, and we'll be doing some success stories and also releasing his Tibbetts video that got the award. Montalvo is an example of a company with 50 plus employees. So it's not just startups. They were an existing company. They submitted a phase 1 award or submitted a phase 1 that was declined because they made it sound like too much of a quote unquote engineering exercise. And they did not see the risk and the opportunity. They retooled, rewrote, resubmitted, and received a phase 1, a phase 2, and then also follow on phase 2B money. So it's a great story. So next steps, explore SBIR.gov, look at the various agencies, do keyword searches at SBIR.gov to see what the awards have been made in your technology area. And you also might find out 2 things: who's your competition and who might be customers or partners. So definitely spend some time on SBIR.gov, start networking, talking to others. Every agency has a listserv and newsletter or email information listservs that you can sign up for. Do that. Sit in on agency and MTI presentations as they become available. One of the things within SBIR.gov is they have the links to all 11 federal agencies, SBIR specific websites, or you can just Google like USDA SBIR or EPA SBIR and have a look at their agency websites. With NOAA, they're doing a presentation this afternoon, I believe at 1 o'clock. And so if you want to sit in on that, Google NOAA SBIR, and you'll be able to do that. And then finally, read the solicitation once you find it. It's very, very important, and it has all of the information you need to submit a full proposal. Again, spend some time getting prepared to spend 140 to 180 hours to write your phase 1. The registration process is onerous at best, and the main PTAC, or now called Apex Accelerators, will be able to guide you through that process. It is at no charge to you, and it is Maine, MAINEPTAC.org. And get your registration started if you are thinking about applying to the program. Pull your team together, read the solicitation, work with us. We'll help you understand the elements of the proposal. And now Suzanne is going to spend just a couple of minutes working or talking about the FAST Award, the Federal and State Technology Partnership Award that MTI received. Suzanne?
Thanks, Karen.
Sure.
So the federal government, through the Small Business Administration, has been administering this SBIR STTR program for several decades, as Karen mentioned. And one of the things they've been trying to do over the years is to really encourage additional participation in the program, especially in some of the underrepresented areas, such as women, socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and small businesses in underrepresented areas like rural states, in which case we all qualify because we're in a rural state. So MTI has had 2 different awards in the past. We've been getting them about every decade or so, and we have another award that we're starting to launch now. This award is helping us. It's going to be hopefully a 5-year award. With the first year, it is helping fund additional education and outreach, such as this webinar. And we are pretty excited. The TAP team is a really well-known team and service throughout the U.S. And there are a lot of states, such as Massachusetts, who are very jealous of this resource. So you should all take advantage of it. Karen's an incredible resource, and also a Tibbetts Award winner, which I think she didn't mention. But we're excited because while we are good at partnering with the ecosystem and helping guide people to other resources to help develop their technology or commercialization plan, their technology roadmap, their team, we have done it in a fairly informal way. And with this funding, we're going to really try to be a lot more deliberate and proactive. So if you work with Karen to find that you are a good fit for an agency submission sometime mid next year, we can help identify an action plan for how to get you better prepared and positioned for a competitive submission over the next 6 months or so. And as part of that, for those who are well suited and are making a lot of progress, we're going to dangle an additional little temptation of a pitch competition sometime late next spring or early summer that you can may be able to participate in advance of submitting a proposal next summer or early next fall. So I think with that, we've only got about 5 minutes left. We should probably ask if there are any questions about anything you've heard or next steps, etc.
And also too, I want to, if you've got any questions, please just jump right in. But also I want you to hear from Shane Beckim, who is a Senior Investment Officer at MTI. But first, let's see if we have any questions. All right, so Krista asked, Karen said we need to complete registrations with grants.gov or other entities. So that's a good question. There are registrations you have to do across the board, first with the Internal Revenue Service, then with SAM.gov, the SBIR.gov registration for small businesses, and then the agency portal for submission. And as many can attest that have gone through the process on their own, don't do it. Go to mainptac.org and sign up for free services from one of the counselors at Maine PTAC, and they will help you and guide you through the process at no additional cost. So they can help you do the registrations all the way through the submission portal like grants.gov or Fed Connect or assist with NIH. Are Phase 2B funds available for all SBIRs? Phase 2B funds are dependent on the agency. Not all agencies have Phase 2B monies. I mentioned the National Science Foundation has Phase 2B money, but keep in mind with Phase 2B money, you have to have outside match that is non-conditional. And also the Department of Energy has, I think, 2 follow-on $1 million awards. But if you go for a third, you have to have a 50% match as well. So it all is agency dependent. Okay, and on that note, I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Shane Beckim. And Shane will just give you a little bit of an introduction, if you will, about the SBIR STTR program. Not the program, I'm sorry, MTI's programs, because, you know, maybe SBIR isn't for you, but the opportunities available for funding from MTI could be. So, Shane?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shane Beckim. I'm a Senior Investment Officer at MTI. I've been with MTI for about 18 years now, almost 19 years now. So I oversee some programs relative to working with Karen and the Technical Assistance Program team. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the MTI standard MTI funding programs, which is traditionally what we're known for. So at MTI, we offer grants and loans and equity investments at different stages. And as Karen mentioned, if the SBIR world is not sort of the space for you, MTI potentially could be. We're looking at funding innovative new technologies or the utilization of technologies for the advancement of your company with the sole purpose of creating jobs and economic impact at the end of that effort. So there needs to be a commercial application for what it is that you're working on, very much like within the SBIR world. We have funding ranging from early stage grants to conduct prototype development, to do some customer analysis, to do market research, develop your strategy in advance of prototyping and testing, and later on introducing your technology into the marketplace. So funds ranging from $25,000 to $100,000 in grant funding, And then once you eclipse that, you can go after some MTI funding for either equity or debt investment. Now, the great thing about MTI funding is it's a great pairing to the SBIR world. So if you're going after SBIR funding, you should also be looking at MTI funding to bridge those gaps in between the SBIR phase 1, phase 2, or continued funding from the SBIR, and weave all of these programs together to continue funding the development of your technology and bring it to market. So the other additional component that we have, which Suzanne touched on a little bit, is the technical assistance program. So with the technical assistance program, you get the resources of Karen and Suzanne and some government accounting assistance and some early stage market research, all in the preparation of your SBIR proposal. That's at no cost to you. MTI funds those resources for your benefit to help improve the quality of your SBIR, STTR proposal to any of the 11 agencies or any of the sub-agencies associated with that, or any other federal R&D opportunity. So if you're looking for those types of resources, you can visit maintechnology.org, click on Get Started, register, and we'll put you in contact either with Karen and the Technical Assistance Program team to help provide those SBIR TAP resources, or you'll be assigned to meet with an MTI investment officer who will explore the opportunities for MTI funding with you to see if we can help further the development of your innovation. So that's sort of MTI in a nutshell, and I trust that you're in good hands with Karen and Suzanne here. If you have any other questions, you can visit maintechnology.org or reach out to any one of our team members.
Great. Thank you, Shane. Certainly appreciate it. And MTI has been a strong player in Maine's ecosystem, and that's going to continue as we keep moving forward. Finally, here's our contact information for Shane, Suzanne, and myself, and the maintechnology.org website. MTI has a great e-newsletter that goes out monthly with President Brian Whitney's blog, but it also has a section on there from the SBIR world that talks about what solicitations are currently open and also what's upcoming. So you can monitor when solicitations will be released or be released from the federal agencies.